Welcome to the Podfather podcast. You can find all our episodes on podfather.me, and you'll find my 6 podcasts. You can scan the QR code or go to roycollin.com. If you're looking for virtual assistance, go to va.world. My guest is the host of 10-Minute Ecom Success, is an affiliate marketer turned passive revenue consultant for e-commerce business. His unique take on marketing helps his clients add exceptional results to their bottom line. After losing everything to Hurricane Ian, he stumbled his way into bootstrapping $4.7 million for a client in 16 months, which is incredible, I might add, which he made a radical marketing discovery and learned that working with established online businesses to increase their customer value was a lot more fun and rewarding than hiding behind his computer on his own. Today's mission is to help e-commerce business owners identify the tiny hinges that swing big doors in their business to increase their profitability. His approach is to interview leading e-commerce experts, and I can say that I've looked at the list that he's got, and they are the top of the range on the most profitable methods and strategies that they use to grow and scale online business so that other e-commerce business owners can model and duplicate their success. And then for our listeners who own an e-commerce business, the entire interview series is available free, and you can sign up at 10minuteecomsuccess.com/podfather, where each leading e-commerce expert guides you through their single most powerful tip, technique, or strategy that produces the best results. From Florida, now living in Arkansas, please welcome Marc Rodill.
Hey, Roy, thanks for having me on. I appreciate that introduction. That was very generous and covered all the bases. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. And like sometimes I don't do that, but I think it's important because then people understand what this is going to be about and how we can actually benefit them. So I suppose let's kind of learn a bit about Marc first before we go delving into the success that you've created. Kind of, you've moved from Florida, but what's your kind of career?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm a growth marketing consultant, like I said, for e-commerce companies, and I do specialize in helping them use strategic alliances to help them add more passive revenue to their bottom line. And so along those lines of alliances, what I did is I started an interview series with these leading e-commerce experts about their best business building strategies. And so obviously in the podcasting world, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, right? So I just want to say, I will start by saying that my number one tip that I would share with your audience today is specifically for people who want to interview guests. Okay, so that way they can do podcast marketing as a guest to grow their audience. And so first of all, if you're not going to do an interview podcast, if it's just you or you and your co-host, this won't apply to you. But if you are interviewing guests, then it does work pretty well. So yeah.
And like you've 4.7 million. I mean, that's incredible. I'm hoping that they didn't spend 4 million on actual ad spend. Like, was there a very good return on investment from the ad spend for that one?
I hesitate to say this because sometimes it's unbelievable, but it was actually 100% profit.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was very lucrative for the client and therefore for me. Actually, it was all on a pay for performance basis. And so I had that client for 2 years, roughly, lost them through no fault of my own, but it was very lucrative and I was living nicely for a little while. I was recently separated and like you said, had to move to Arkansas because the hurricane wiped me out, Hurricane Ian. If anybody looks up Hurricane Ian, 2022, September, wiped out everything. So my city was like a complete landfill, and except for my community had a wall around it. So there's this big concrete wall around the community. And my ex used to always be like, "Oh, we don't have a backyard because there's this big concrete wall." And I was like, "I love this house, right?" Because I envisioned it, I selected it, had everything that I wanted, and it was a rental. But so on the other side of that wall during the hurricane, the water was literally up to the top of the wall, and people were riding by on boats to help survivors. And so it was pretty gnarly. When I got back, because I left, and I've been in Florida basically my entire life, and in North Carolina for a little bit when I was growing up. And so North Carolina, Florida, you're always getting hit by hurricanes. So you're so used to it over there. You're like, nah, hurricane. Right. So, but then my ex came up to me while I was working on some marketing stuff for e-commerce clients back then, doing emails for them, supplement companies. She's like, hey, check this out, on the Weather Channel. And I'm watching this thing and I'm like, we got to leave. so, so we left. We came back to nothing. And I lost everything within a 2-month period. So community was devastated. My relationship ended. It was too stressful. She left with my daughter. So I lost custody of my daughter. And then my father died shortly thereafter, literally 2 months to the day after that. And so when you lose everything, sometimes you're willing to start new. And I met this guy and I stumbled into working with this big fancy e-commerce company that sold digital products. And one thing led to another. And sure enough, I helped them bootstrap 4.7 million in 16 months. And it was a whirlwind, but a lot of it was through strategic alliances. And I learned a lot, So basically I came back and started bringing a little bit more of it out to the world. So.
Yeah, excellent. And I mean, that's it tends to, when stuff goes wrong, we tend to get slapped in all directions. And I'm just curious because I see so much corruption with insurance companies. Did they put that as an act of God and you get no cover? Did they use one of them kind of tricks on me?
So yeah, things were not good. I mean, FEMA, probably all about them, based on what we both know and stuff like that. Not really good payouts. You got to apply, it was really bad. Luckily, like I said, the only thing I lost was my car. The water did seep into the neighborhood and filled up the garage, but you have to imagine on the other side of this wall, it's like 8-foot wall. The water's up to the top of the wall. So the house was luckily protected, but everything else around it, gone.
That's frightening. So I suppose.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it before in my life. Just imagine like a landfill and it's your city, the entire thing.
Yeah, unreal. So thankfully, you're free. I mean, you're out at the water area. No, I don't know what Arkansas does. It have the same thing, but with this business, I suppose let's let's touch on what you've done with the 10-minute conversations, because you've interviewed all top people and you're getting the best information from them. And what I like is, the fact that you're doing 10 minutes, you're just going for boom, 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 get the best out of it, because you're not going to be kind of shooting the breeze and moving on.
So yeah, to that, you're not shooting the breeze. You are getting down to business, but some of the tips that I would share about that, they fit right into that. And so, but first, I just want to point out, like I'm on the business side of things as a service provider. And so in my case, using this to grow your audience means specifically to generate leads to grow your business. So if you're doing like a consumer podcast to grow your audience, to sell like sponsorship placements, I can't speak to that. My experience is in using interviews to create a lead generation magnet in order to generate leads to sell services. All right. And by the way, I'm an introvert. Sometimes it doesn't come across, but big introvert, like level 9,000 million. Okay. So it took me a long time to figure this out. Even though most of it actually came from my mentor, so I can't take credit from it. These are his ideas and strategies, and we work together. But actually, the longest part of figuring it out was just getting started, okay? Because many times, like, the real tragedy is that we just take so long to get started, right? But when your back's against the wall and you have no choice, things change. You might get started a little bit easier. But so that being said, yeah, I'll give your listeners the big idea. And then I'll just give a few like implementation steps that I executed to put it into action, if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in my experience of doing this, when it comes to interviewing people, like everything else in life and in business, it's all about these many different kinds of relationships. And so I'll explain what I mean by many different kinds as we go through it, because I found that you can tap into this in like 4 different tactical ways. And by the way, they're not immediately obvious, especially if you don't like have any relationships with any experts yet. Okay. So the number one relationship you want to think about is, what's their relationship to your topic? So can they relate your topic back to them? Right. So in other words, it's got to be a good fit for their expertise. And so you don't want something that's just generic and like for everybody, especially when you're like just getting started. You want something that's specific, that's a fit for them. So in my case, like you said, it's all about interviewing e-commerce business building experts on their best business building strategies. So that's in direct alignment with e-commerce experts. So whoever you want to interview, number one is just make sure your topic's in alignment with them and their expertise, right? And so number two relationship is they really got to get something out of it, right? So relationship number two is that it should increase their relationships with their ideal audience. Okay. And so if you have a decent audience already, that's a good match for them. You'd be sure to let them know, right? But in my case, I didn't have that. And so I said, hey, when you let me interview you, here's what I'll do. I will compile the best tips from the series, and then I'll go promote them on podcasts. So that drives traffic to the series and therefore to you, right? And, that's important because at the end of the day, and you know this, I mean, you can start a podcast all you want, but you still need to market your podcast and get the word out about it, especially today. It's not like podcast is some new thing anymore, right? And so one of the best ways to do that is by going on established podcasts. Like that's why I'm here today, right? And so having an interview series gives you something to talk about when you go on podcasts. And number two, that increases your potential guest relationships with their ideal audience. And it does help lead them to wanting to say yes to you. All right. And so third relationship is what is their relationship, the expert, to all of your other potential guests? And this is kind of like a little subtle hack, but in other words, you want to tap into their relationship to everyone else. All right. And so this is where you got to do your homework. And so first of all, it presupposes that you know your industry. So if you don't know your industry inside and out, you can't skip over this part. You have to know it. And so, but the way it benefits you is that when you invite experts on who know each other, and then you let them all know who you're inviting when you reach out to them, it establishes that you understand the industry. So even if you don't have a track record publicly yet, it credentializes you. And so, the industry, you know who's leading it, you're familiar with it, and they all recognize that. And so that leads to relationship number 4, which is their relationship to you. So right off the bat, you've established 2 things. You are someone who knows what you're doing, and you're there to help them grow. That creates a good first impression to start off their relationship with you. And so when I started, I just said, this is who I've invited to participate. Not that I've interviewed them yet, just that I've invited them. So that way they understood that I know what I'm doing a little bit, right? And so once you have that baseline relationship with them in place, you have a related topic, it's going to help them, and who's an expert, so you have a good idea of what you're doing, then you just continue to build on that relationship with them from there. Yeah.
And like what system? Because we've kind of talked about regarding. I mean, we've connected via Podmatch, which is brilliant. But for what you're doing, that's not necessarily. You might find 1 or 2, but it's not the place. So you're reaching out to these people. Do you kind of do a few target approaches, like go Instagram, LinkedIn, email, or do you just go email and keep resending? What system did you find worked best for you?
Yeah, so that's a good question. That is, I guess, a little bit of a sneak peek behind the curtain of lead generation, I guess you would say. But it's no different than anyone who's ever been involved with cold email. You just got to find their email address, okay? And these guys are business guys, and so a lot of times they're willing to be found if you're willing to find them. So you just got to go through the channels. There's a lot of different ways to find people's email addresses. Personally, I do use LinkedIn, to do that. And I don't really talk about that much because it's like, oh, my little secret, right? But so they have their emails in their profiles. All right. So many times if you connect with them, well, they'll give them to you because they'll just have it there in their contact info. But on the flip side of the coin, when I first started doing this, I wasn't connected to any of them. If anyone checks out my LinkedIn, it looks kind of fancy because I got a bunch of connections now. But when I started, I didn't have many. I think I had like 300 or whatever. And I more than doubled that in like the past a couple months. And so I'm connected to them now because I've started interviewing them. That sure helps get you connected to people. But there's various extensions, so I use an extension called Contact Out. I wish I could say contact out / Marc Rodill, but I'm not affiliated. But so contact out works great, and there's other ones. I saw this other one that's a new one. I don't remember the name of it. It's like Proprio or something like that. But they're all over the place, these different solutions for finding people's emails.
And when you're interviewing the people, then do you actually ask them of other people that they would recommend going on the show? Because sometimes people don't do that, but that's very beneficial, especially if you have a good conversation. People are very happy to recommend their friends to come on your show.
Yeah, I do. But so the thing is I do have 5 tips that I would share about, well, actually 3 tips and then 2 amplifiers, right? So, but yeah, I do ask that, but like that's not going to work if you don't do these other things. And so you started podcasting a long time ago. You're like a natural at it now. So you're very good. When we hopped on, you did all the right things, right? But if you're like someone like me who's new to this world and you're just using it to do marketing to generate leads, and you're kind of introverted by a lot, and you're not naturally like good at communication, even though some people might think otherwise. But that's just because I have a long track record of my sordid tales of failure in my past. So like I have basically 15 years of failure before I had my first really big success. I've had successes along the way, as we all do, but lots of failure. But so I spent a lot of time failing and being in the restaurant business, right? And so it's kind of ironic. I first got started in online marketing because I wanted to escape the restaurant business. And I did escape and I had some success online, but I ended up pulling the plug because I just had a lot of limiting beliefs. And so I went back to my nice, quiet life of desperation, waited tables, and learned how to talk to people, and did a lot of drugs because I was completely miserable. But so you come back, and I learned that you want to apply some of these things that I learned from that world to like interviewing people. So that way they'll give you other people, right? Because if you don't do these things, they might not recommend you, right? But I actually had an experience where, so I got off started slowly. All right. So I had 3 interviews within like 2 months, and I just trying. I didn't really get anything. But then Kurt Elster, I reached out to Kurt, and Kurt agreed to come on, and I did all the right things. All right. And so at the end of the thing, I asked him, who else do you know? And I hadn't asked anybody that yet. And Kurt had such a good time and was pleasantly surprised with the interview, how it went, how it actually occurred in live conditions, that he was, you know, he was so happy to give me referrals, and he gave me 5 of them. Okay. And so 4 out of 5 of those referrals came on. And so I doubled the number of interviews in 2 weeks. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. But so like, I'll give you some 3 quick tips that might seem obvious if you're an expert at this and you've done this for a long time. But also even if you are an expert at this and you've done this for a long time, some of these are good reminders. But number 1 is just like, don't forget this is their relationship to you, right? Because you want to interview experts. They're the real deal. All right. So you got to know what you're doing and come across that way every step of the way to build up that relationship where at the end they'll be happy to give you referrals, because referrals, they're getting referred to you by someone they know, like, and trust. So they're much more likely to come on. And so number 1 is be professional, right? Okay. So like, have a calendar link. Anyone who's really busy these days, they prefer calendar links a lot of times because they don't have to do the back and forth of the emails. They can just delegate to their assistant. It has notifications and reminders. It adds it to your calendar automatically. You could put in the description like a recording checklist. Like, nobody really does this, but I just had an epiphany. I'm like, let me telegraph that I've done this before, because I have done lots of meetings online before. And so I just put a recording checklist in there that said, like, don't use Wi-Fi, because, and then make sure you wear headphones so the audio is good, and close all your programs, and even if they've done interviews a million times, they read that and they go, oh, he's done this before, or he knows what he's doing, right? And so that starts it off on the right foot. That leads to them wanting to show up more because they're anticipating like, oh, I don't know this guy. I don't know how it's going to go. Maybe I shouldn't show up because I suddenly got busy, you know? So before the interview, put it in there. And then they have it in their calendar invitation, the description, and they're like, oh, yeah, let me grab my favorite headphones. Let me make sure my Ethernet's plugged in, oh, there's notifications to make sure I show up. That was helpful, right? So little things like that go a long way to making sure you have a good interview. For starters, like actually making sure they book a time with you in the first place and then they show up, right? Number two, when they show up, don't just jump into it immediately. Don't just hit record and jump right in, right? And you did a great job of this. As soon as I hopped on, you're not like click record and then it's like, oh, okay, game on, right? So unless they're in a rush, don't do that. If they're not in a rush, when you like, if they're not in a rush, you being in a rush does not help you, right? It makes them feel rushed and nobody likes that. So do a little small talk, just like, hey, how's your day? Let them answer. I mean, everybody likes it when you give them space to talk about themselves if they want to. So just let them answer, let them throw out something relatable about their day, relate back to it, but keep it short. And then, like we said, get down to business. So just a minute or two. Hey, how's it going? What are you up to today? Where are you? Don't spend too much time on this, but be human. Ask them if they have any questions before you record and then answer their questions. And all of that helps build up the relationship, which is going to help you get more guests on, right? And so as an introvert, first of all, I struggle with this because I get nervous. You might see by me sitting here, I move around a little bit. I got a lot of energy in the body. So here's a quick tip I learned to start the call a little bit better. Even if you're already doing this part pretty well, I promise this will make it a little bit better. But just right before the call, just take a few minutes and do nothing but sit there for a few minutes, close your eyes and just breathe. All right. And don't balk at this. Just do it. Like put your hand over your heart, close your eyes for a few minutes. And right before you fire up the Zoom meeting or whatever you're using, just allow yourself to open up to the space around you, stop feeling everything in the body and just try to feel the room around you. And even if you're a pro, by the way, and interviews like don't phase you anymore, you're still going to have all the garbage from your day clinging to you that you went through, especially if you had a busy day. So you just want to separate from that and just be cool, calm, and collected. If you show up frazzled in a hurry, it comes across, and then you frazzle your guests a little bit, and they don't like that. And so the third thing is along those lines, this is what I found was key for me, and I did this every single time. And this was just something that was my intuition. But along those lines, what I found is really helpful is to actually introduce them. And so you hear it all the time on podcasts. They're like, hey, today my guest is so-and-so. Thanks for coming on. Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody? And that's the way it starts. And that's like totally expected. If the bar's set really low, it's like what everyone average does. So when you set yourself apart from that, they notice. Okay. So do a little extra homework researching your guest. Actually build them an introduction before they come on that makes them sound as cool as they really are, right? And make sure it's along the lines with their bio, but just like 2 or 3 sentences, right? And when you do that, it totally changes the energy. Okay, they go, oh, wow, okay. You can see it on their face in live real time, right? They go, okay, wow, this is someone who's done their homework. They know who I am. It's not just another interview with someone who doesn't know anything about me. Because that's like the worst thing for them, right? Is when they get on an interview and the host doesn't know anything about them. And so they're delighted when you do. All right. So for example, when I interviewed Chase Clymer of the Honest E-commerce podcast, top 5% podcast host, it's funny, Chase about exploded out of his chair in the beginning when you can see this on camera because he liked his intro so much. Okay. And so did everyone else, by the way. And so show up to your own interview like 20 or 30 minutes early. Practice your intro a few times until you get the hang of it, until it just sounds natural. And you can just write it down. I mean, it's not that hard. I had it on the computer screen. I saw you had it on, looked like a sheet of paper or an iPad or something. But like, You just need to be able to read it. It's not that hard. And then have your questions for them about whatever your topic's about. Have some follow-up questions for them based on that. So like totally obvious stuff, in my opinion, right? Just be prepared, be organized and prepared. Now, assuming everything goes well and they had a good relationship with you, then yeah, the biggest thing you can do at the end is just say, hey, oh, by the way, who else do you know who would be a perfect fit for this? And then just shut up and let them answer, right? Don't just, hey, who else did you know would be a good fit for this? Because blah, 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 blah. It's so wonderful. You're so wonderful. I've done this. You've done that. I remember earlier you said that. And I really, no, just who else do you know that would be a good fit? And not by the way, do you know anybody, right? Because they all know somebody. And so if they're willing to come on, then they know somebody else who's willing to come on. I promise you. And no, not all of them will refer someone to you, but many of them will. And not all the people they refer will agree to come on either. But again, many of them will. And so that's what happened with me and Kurt. And so after that happened with Kurt, I asked everybody. And each one of them, almost every single one of them gave me at least one or two people. And so it just grew from there.
Excellent. You've actually mentioned a lot of things that you say that kind of as if it's normal and it's kind of run of the mill. But I've been on a lot of shows and so many people, they just turn up the last minute. They're reaching for stuff. They're panicked. I have 15 minutes always beforehand that I'm knowing that they're coming in and I've everything ready. I prepare on the day because just in case there's a cancellation, because when you do the preparation, if there's a cancellation, then you're doing it again. And it's like, so it's rare that they cancel on the same day. So that's why it's something, and plus it's more natural to me as well that I remember it. But like the breath work, I mean, I have the meditation podcast. That's very important because, you know, like you're not the only one. I mean, I was extremely shy as well. You're saying, you know, that kind of introvert. I mean, I kind of went from introvert to extrovert. I call myself an ambivert now. I went from very shy to being able to speak on stage and overcoming that. But there's awesome people that have that as well. And breath work really helps. And just kind of just stepping back and just breathe. And most people think no. And I just say, hey, a lot of people, they're smoking and they feel relaxed. And the reason they feel relaxed is they're taking breaths that they don't normally do, which they should. And, you know, so all the different things that you've said are very important. And I mean, I've seen a lot of people as well. I introduce yourself. You're right. Like, cause it is nice when you know, cause even if I don't do I don't always read it, but I'll always mention a few points for the person to say what it is. And it's also like a lot of people don't realize is a listener comes in and they're just curious. And if you're not really saying what this is going to be about for about 5-10 minutes, they could be gone. They're not coming back.
Right.
If you say it at the start, they go, oh, this is interesting for me. And even if it's not, that's okay as well. I know, even if you followers, there might be some episodes that aren't for them, and that's okay. But you actually let them know, and a lot of people actually fail to do that. So a load of this.
Right. Yeah, I totally.
Very helpful.
Yeah. And so the thing is like, it's all about relationships is sort of my theme here is like, it's your like you said, it's your relationship to the listener. It's your relationship to the guest. It's your relationship to the host, you know, as a host, you know, as a guest, the audience, right? And then between the experts, right? So I wanted to give you a little amplifier there. There's two amplifiers that I use. The first one is ask for referrals, but like do a good job, you know, like be a professional at that. You don't like, I just hopped on with somebody before I came on with you. It was the same thing. He was 10 minutes late and he's the host, you know, and then he's on there, he's scrambling and it felt uncomfortable. You know, I was like, I don't think I'm in the right place. And then the audio video wasn't good. And so it crashed. And then after it crashed, I'm just like, no, I'm probably not going to do it now, you know, and no offense to that person, but it's just the environment wasn't conducive to making sure a good interview takes place. All right. So, but once a good interview does occur, definitely ask them and just be silent. You know, it's like sales 101, ask for what you want and then just shut your mouth. Right. So, and I have a hard time doing that. You know, it's kind of ironic. Yes, I'm a very introverted person. I would never describe myself as an extrovert though, which just like sometimes blows people away. But essentially, like, I just learned some skills to talk, And so when you go through that process and you ask them who they know, you get off, you get some referrals. Go ahead and reach out to those referrals. But here's a nice little trick that I learned is when you build your list initially of everyone you want to interview, and like, so I started with 30. And by the way, I started with 30 and it was first going to be called the health. I wasn't going to tell anybody this, but I might as well, right? I started off with health supplement success and I built a list of people like 30 and I reached out and for whatever reason, it wasn't a good fit for those people. And so I had a couple tries at this, right? So sometimes you might have a couple failures when you're trying to get something off the ground and then you just go make a second list of people. And then that one didn't work either. All right. And then the third time I got one that works. Right. And so, but what I did each time is I built a list of about like 20 or 30 people. And then I picked out the top 10, roughly, 10 or 12. And then, so as soon as someone comes on and it's a good interview, then reach back out to everyone else you originally invited and just say, hey, so and so guest just came on and I'd still love to have you on. Right. And you send it back to your original group. And you say, just like, so I've copied my original invitation below in case you missed it and just put it in there. Because as soon as someone killer comes on, it builds up everyone else's desire to participate because they know each other. And so if he's doing it, I want to do it. If she's doing it, I want to do it. And so whenever you get an interview with anybody, no matter what kind of podcast you run, always ask them who else they know who's a perfect fit. And then reach out to everyone else you invited and let them know that they came on. All right. And you'll get momentum that way.
And another thing is, like, sometimes you'll have listeners or friends when they know exactly what you're doing that will actually make recommendations. So I know that, like, Mickey Willis on Waking, that was basically somebody that I met at an event and they said, you should have him on your show. I know somebody that's friends with him. And I was like, great. And it just happened like that. And the other one is a belief system. So, like, I've had David Icke, and I was like, that was early. I think I know it was at the 9th episode. And I just kind of said, yeah, I want him because I liked what he's doing. I read his book and I kind of just reached out. And what I liked about him, and like there's a lot of them, that they weren't kind of show me your analytics, show me your numbers and everything. They were like, yeah, grand, coming on. Whereas there's a lot of people, they want to know everything. And to me, that's not coming from the heart. That's kind of coming from the financial side of things. And when people come on and they're just kind of, they get what you're doing and they're happy, that it makes a big difference. And like, the thing is, what helps as well is putting it out there. Like, I wanted John Perkins on my show from the start. I made a list of people that I'd love to have on. And it took about, 5 years now. So it's only recently, it's not so long ago. But I was like, I said it to a few people and eventually we got him. But because I put it out there. So if there's somebody that you want, let people know, because you don't know who knows who. And eventually they'll think of it when somebody makes a connection and just happen to say, hey, I know such a person. Or if they're on a show that they know the person, they can go, hey, I know my friend is looking to have them on. And just something as simple as that. So when you actually put it out there, I think it's kind of allowing it to happen as well.
Well, that's the flip side of the coin about all this, is because I did actually get 2 interviews from my first 2 go-arounds, right? So I didn't get nothing. So that was like a little spark. But so I was like, there's something to it, right? There's something here, but I just need to adjust, right? So I adjusted. But then when I actually started getting going, basically what I learned is that a lot of people, like you said, will come on because they just are encouraged and inspired that you have the courage to do something, to put yourself out there, to get something started. Like a lot of these guys, especially entrepreneurs or business people or self-improvement people or anybody into like health and wellness kind of mindset stuff, they are like happy to support builders, right? People who want to do something new, who are trying to step out of their comfort zone. A lot of them told me that. They're like, you know, I'm not sure where, if this goes anywhere, but, I just want to support what you're doing, right? Because it's awesome that you're stepping out there to, add value in the way that you think that you can, whatever that is, right? And so, yeah, you won't get everyone you invite, obviously. People are busy. Some people care about the analytics, so maybe you're not big enough for them yet. I did encounter that quite a bit. I encountered it with no response so, so one of my favorite quotes someone once said was, "No response is a response." Right. So that's how I started to treat that. There was a lot of letting go during this process because I did, like you said, people cancel on you at the last minute, and I had one of my biggest guests at the time. I had tons of great guests on before this guest, but this one I was particularly excited about because out of all the guests that I had, this one I did the most research on. So I like watched all of his videos, learned his whole backstory, and I was just like, I really like what this person represents and stands for, but he didn't show up, and with no word of warning, no cancellation. And so I ended up rescheduling it. And then right before it was going to happen, 1 hour before it was going to happen, he rescheduled it. And so I was like, okay. And then, or actually, I think I got that backwards. I think that happened first. And then he didn't show up to that one. Right. And no word, nothing. And I'm just like, I went through a series of emotions. Okay. But so I released on all of that, and I just was normal and followed up with him. And then he gets on with me and he was like, "Mark, you're like a follow-up ninja." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, cool. Thanks for saying that, man. I'm glad you're here." And it was cool or whatever. But so anyone, they might not come on because they don't like your analytics. Maybe they just don't like your hair, whatever it is. But in my experience, doing everything that we talked about today helps a lot. And so that's my tip, is that it's all about relationships. And like we talked about earlier, everyone can see an example of the results that came out of doing this. Currently, there are 25 interviews from leading e-commerce experts like Jimmy Kim, Andrew Ferris, Ron Shaw, all very well-known names in the e-commerce space about how to grow your e-commerce business. And so for Podfather listeners who are in e-commerce, they just want to check it out. The entire interview series is available for free, and you can sign up at 10-minute ecom success /Podfather, where they guide you through their most powerful tips and strategies for them or their clients. Okay. And you can type the number 10 or spell it out. It works either way, but that's ecom with one M, by the way, 10-minute ecom success /Podfather. But yeah, that all led to quite the series. And I'm currently in phase 2, which is the whole point of this, really, at the end of the day, is I now have something that I can compile the best tips and strategies from, and then invite myself onto leading e-commerce podcasts to share those tips from these experts to generate leads for the series. All right. And so email market the list and dig the well before you thirst. Because that was one of the things that happened to me. I had my big fancy client for 2 years. It was very lucrative, but so I enjoyed it. I didn't go crazy with it, but we all live lives, right? So I got married. I met someone who I identified was a perfect fit for me. I didn't believe in marriage for me personally at all whatsoever. But for some reason, when I met this woman, I was just like, I can't not marry her. Like, I had this intuition, like it would be a huge mistake if I didn't marry her. So I married her quickly. I proposed to her within 11 days and we got married within 41 days. And so I then moved my brand new wife from Florida with me and her 2 stepchildren, who, now I've adopted them, to Arkansas to be with my daughter. All right. And so when you get this kind of stuff right, it affords you the finances to kind of have a little bit more freedom to do things. Because when I first started working with that client, I really did lose everything. I had no money in my bank account. My father had just passed away, and I was literally calling my mother to ask her to borrow money to pay my rent. And she's a recent widow. So these are really bad timing. And she yelled at me the 3rd time I asked her. She said, "Never ask me. I'll do it, but never ask me again." Right. She sends it to me. And literally that day, I had produced enough money with my client where I didn't need it. And so that was really cool. And one thing led to another, and it just kind of grew from there.
Very good. And just like you mentioned, the guy that it was like, 3 times. I have that I have a 3-strike rule. It's like, there's something happens, sometimes, yeah.
Well, this was during, I think, the California fires, by the way. So he had like a family emergency with his family. He flew out there. So like shit happens, dude. And so, he didn't let me know probably because he was in an emergency,
Yeah.
but some people, they don't show up for no reason. It's just like a scheduling error with their assistant. And so you just be professional. You say, hey, missed you today, you know, um, let's reschedule, and you send the link and say, hey, sorry, I missed you, today. So, but like, so a lot of people, me included, by the way. So I don't want to say like, oh, I'm like, but so like me included, a lot of us, when something goes wrong, we get very emotional about it. I certainly feel all of that. And then the way you'll behave under that emotional energy is just not conducive to making things happen. So you really just got to take some space from it and be professional.
Yeah. What I've learned is, I mean, I was always very chilled about it and just say, yeah, let's reschedule. And it's three. I don't go more than three because things get in the way. But there was one client that and it really annoyed him. Somebody didn't turn up, and he'd send an email kind of going, "You're not respecting my time and everything."
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, yeah. And I went along with it. And I've stopped doing that because, like, we don't know what's going on in other people's lives.
You don't know. Yeah.
It's very rare. I think maybe twice that it didn't happen because there was a tree strike, and I knew they're just wasting my time. And it's unfortunately it's usually the crypto because they got money, they weren't used to money. And then they get money and they think they're kind of better than people. And I think that's the reason why there's so many in the crypto space, but everywhere else don't. But I've learned that it's better to be sweet and say, hey, we missed each other, what happened? And sometimes you get a whole page of apology that they actually, because we know it's happened to me a couple of times, rarely, very rarely, but it's happened to me. So I know sometimes if the calendar doesn't, or you just get sidetracked and for some reason you just don't put the reminder on. So no, like,
well, the thing is like you said, you're not respecting my time. That might be true in some cases because we're all people and there's all kinds of different people out there. So some of them might not be respecting your time, but it definitely doesn't benefit you to let them know.
Exactly.
Yeah, because like you said, if you're just cool about it and you like make it okay, then a lot of times they'll come back and they'll apologize profusely.
Exactly. Whereas they're too embarrassed. And if you write with an abusive will, not even just a kind of on point email, they're too embarrassed to respond back and they just let it go. They go, yeah, let's not.
Well, you never know what's happening in their lives, but you also never know if what they're saying is actually everybody comes up with the reason why they weren't there. But so like they are very apologetic. When that happened to me very few times, like you said, but like they are very apologetic if you're just cool about it. And then it's sort of a little awkward because you're so cool about it. You're like, hey, it's not a big deal, but just like 2 days ago, you were fuming. So, but you really do. I really did let it go. And then it happened. But so if I had taken out my frustration on that person in the moment when I was feeling it, I don't think it would have happened.
Yeah. Finally, this is one that I'd like you to. Frederick, Valley. I can't even read my own writing. Google Ads guy.
Yeah, Frederick Valais. It's kind of difficult to say his name, but so yeah, what about him?
So, I mean, he's the Google AdWords, and I'm just wondering because no matter what a podcaster is doing, some of them have touched on the Google AdWords, and I'm just, did he share anything that would make our listeners go, "Oh, we're doing it wrong"? That you could share with us?
So, absolutely. And I think it's actually super beneficial to e-commerce companies specifically, especially the ones that sell physical products, but probably any of them, because these days it's all about meta. If you're going to run pay-per-click ads, it's all Meta and Facebook, basically, right? They're the dominant in everybody's mind. But the fact of the matter is that Google actually has a much larger market share of advertising than Facebook. And then people don't realize that, but Facebook has all of the social users by far, right? So, and Instagram, right? So they have the big social community and they run ads to their social community. But Google's network across all of their different search options and display options and Performance Max and Google Shopping, they actually have a larger advertising network that you can tap into, but a lot of people just aren't focused on it. And so Frederick Valles was actually one of Google's first 500 employees. And he was an executive there. So he was one of the leading executives who helped create Google AdWords. And so if anybody knows anything about Google AdWords, it's Fred. Okay. And so Fred comes on and he was like, yeah, you could run performance max campaigns. You could do display, you could do search, whatever. But what a lot of people don't realize about that when they actually work with Google is that Google aggregates all of the data. So it's just all compiled into like this aggregated system where you can't specifically, identify, hey, is this specific video ad on this video outperforming this ad on this display network versus this one on the search? So they'll just aggregate the data. So you can't actually determine if your ad spend is as effective as it could be, right? Because you'll have some that are underperforming, or you'll have some that are performing really well, but you're underserving. And so what he did is he developed a software that splits up the data, and it's automated. So you set up these different automations and it lets you know how your ads are performing in these specific areas. And it lets you know where to decrease your spend or eliminate it, and where to increase it if you're willing to serve that. And his example that he gave was like, you might be running ads on video, but you don't have a lot of video yourself, right? And so once you see that they're really performing, you can make the decision like, oh, we should double down on video ads and video content, right? And so I was like, that's cool, because I specialize strategic alliances, so I'm not really in the weeds on like pay-per-click data analysis and implementation. That's not my thing. But so I used to run Google pay-per-click ads back in the day, when I was first getting started selling all kinds of things as an affiliate, basically, training programs, software, ebooks, stuff like this, right? And so it's all changed dramatically since then. And it's just like, there's all this different things to pay attention to. So he's enabled people who want to use it. And he's managing at the time, $5.3 billion with a B dollars annually in ad spend for his clients. And so I was like, okay, that's cool. Can you give us an example of someone you're doing this with? And he gave the example. I can't remember. I don't know if this is the exact name of the company, but Barbecue Guys. They sell like barbecue stuff. And so he's like, we went through our process with them, and we were able to increase their return by 300%. All right. And so that was kind of a significant jump when it comes to pay-per-click advertising. So yeah, that's what he shared. And he's a great guest. Very gracious, did all the right things on his part. So
excellent. I mean, like, just there's not just that. I don't know. Is it 24, 25? And I mean, obviously, you're adding more to the caliber. So when people sign up, they'll be able to go in and look at these, and they says 10-minute combos. So some are maybe a bit more, but still, you're compressing really good information in a short time. So for anyone that's doing e-com, it's well worth checking out. So listen, Mark, thoroughly enjoyed it. You might let the listeners know where they can find you.
Yeah. So best place to find me, if you're in e-commerce, is obviously 10-minute ecom success for Podfather listeners /Podfather. So I know where you came from. If you want to find me personally, I'm on LinkedIn, Marc Rodill, MARC, Mark with a C. I don't normally say that, but if you want to spell it right to find me, it helps, Mark with a C, Rodill, Rodill. That's probably the best place to connect with me one-on-one. Just send me a note or whatever. And then at my website, marcrodill.com, I have a webinar for people in e-commerce if they want to know more about like the nitty-gritty of strategic alliance setup, the way that I specifically do it, which I do got to get back, reactivate that. But so yeah, that's about the best places to find me.
Okay, perfect. I'll make sure I'll put the links both on the audio and the video. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thanks for having me on, Roy.
No problem. So that's all for the Podfather. You'll find all our episodes on podfather.me. You'll find my 6 podcasts. Scan the QR code and go to roycollin.com. If you're looking for a virtual assistant, go to va.world. Sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends. Until next week, take care.